A landslide election victory may have ushered in a new Iranian president, but there isn't much optimism for a change of governing style. The former head of the judiciary, Ebrahim Raisi, won 62% of the vote and was the strong favorite before a single ballot had been cast, as most of his rivals had been disqualified. Reza Hatami reports from Tehran.
Hardline cleric Ebrahim Raisi lost his 2017 bid to become Iran's president to Hassan Rouhani. But the defeat didn't end his presidential ambitions. Supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei appointed Raisi as head of the judiciary 2 years later. Ever since, he's waged an anti-corruption campaign, trying to cast himself as a champion of the poor who battles relentlessly against poverty and graft.
This
level of class division, the fact that someone gets poor and another one suddenly gets rich, is the result of bad economic decisions. Unfair payment of bank loans results in class division. Unfair decisions have led to class division.
His strategy seems to have worked. He handily won election in his second attempt at the presidency, but it hasn't been without controversy. The hardline vetting body, the Guardian Council, barred Raisi's main rivals from running, putting him in the driver's seat to win the race. Even before the disqualifications, there was little voter enthusiasm for the election. Turnout was less than 50%, as voters have grown angry about their economic hardships. Since the US withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal 3 years ago, the inflation rate has risen from 10% to nearly 40%, and more than half of the Iranian population has been pushed below the poverty line.
The next Iranian government faces daunting challenges. It inherits an economy ravaged by years of US sanctions and a country that suffered one of the worst COVID-19 pandemics in the Middle East.
But there's also a glimmer of hope. Iran has started producing its own COVID-19 vaccines, which will be ready for use soon. And there's optimism that revived nuclear talks between Iran and world powers may soon lead to a removal of sanctions. Raisi initially criticized the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement, but he will continue President Rouhani's push to restore the deal known as the JCPOA.
Our country has a problem on the international stage, and that is the nuclear issue. And the solution is the JCPOA. No other solution exists. Therefore, Raisi believes in the JCPOA and believes that the talks in Vienna should come to a conclusion.
Before those sanctions are lifted, the new president has promised to try to neutralize their effects by establishing closer economic ties with neighboring countries. His message won over a vast majority of the people who turned out at the polls. Raisi won more than 5 times the number of votes of his nearest challenger and easily avoided a runoff. Reza Hatami, TRT World, Tehran.
Let's get more from Hooshang Amirahmadi, who is a distinguished service professor at Rutgers University. He is also the founder and president of the American-Iranian Council. He joins us now from Princeton in New Jersey. Welcome to the show. Now, President Raisi is stepping in at a time when the economy faces many challenges. His predecessor had tried and failed to use a fixed exchange rate. Do you see him coming up with any better plan to fix Iran's economy?
He has to. In fact, he has a few people with him that have been working on an alternative plan for the country, largely based on some radical ideas that will sort of address some of the key problems of the economy at the lower end of the society, like issues like job, inflation, unemployment, housing, education, and the rest. But unfortunately, I don't see at this point Mr. Raisi having a microeconomic plan. They have largely, his predecessor, Mr. Rouhani, largely focused on macroeconomics and the larger policy frameworks like monetary policy, fiscal policy, and the trade policy. But Mr. Raisi must have a microeconomic policy, a policy for industrialization, increasing productivity of the nation, increasing the productivity of the job market, the working people, bringing the capital that needed, bringing the right entrepreneurs to the economy. We have to see. I mean, there's a big job ahead of him, and I think he must come with a plan. Otherwise, he will also suffer the same destiny that Mr. Rouhani faced. But I have to tell you also that Mr. Raisi is taking delivery of an economy that is in a terrible shape. So God help him.
Okay, well, the other big campaign promise was to root out corruption, wasn't it? And he's built a bit of a reputation for that role. On the other hand, though, he is practically the establishment's darling. Do you see him being able to take on state capture and corruption during his tenure?
He has promised to do so, and he has a very interesting point on this. He said, when I was in the judiciary, I was dealing with the people who were corrupt. In the executive branch, I will deal with the corruption itself. Meaning, he said, I will deal with the roots of corruption. I will have to see. I mean, again, there will be a limit to how far he can go. The economy is controlled by a corrupt group of merchants, bankers, I don't know, the money launderers, the landowners, and the rest. So, and they are in control of the economy, and we have to see how far he can go before creating serious reaction from these people, which are powerful. But again, he also would need serious support from the leader Khamenei going in this direction, because some of those corrupt people, directly or indirectly, are connected to the House of Leaders and other very, very powerful institutions. So he has a big job ahead of him in fighting corruption, as opposed to certain select corrupt people.
And Mr. Amirahmadi, before we let you go, very quickly, I want to ask you, Mr. Raisi has talked about building trade with other countries outside of Europe. Who is he talking about? Is he talking about China and Russia?
I think he's also talking about that, yeah, of course, China and Russia, but he's also talking about Turkey. And I think he's also having his eyes on the Arab world. I think Mr. Raisi will reach out to the Saudi Arabia, to the Emirates and others, and trying to build a regional framework that would be more hospitable to the trade interaction. But then again, his problem even there at the regional level will be the United States of America and its sanctions. And I think Mr. Raisi understands this, and his people understand it. So he is for a return to JCPOA, of course, under certain strict conditions, including relief from many key sanctions that has to do with banking, dealing with the dollars and so on. But then also I have to say that Mr. Raisi has been elected by the poor people, the people who really are at the bottom of the society, 50–60% of these people. And he has to respond to their needs, and he has very little time. So I think he will have to jump in the direction of making some kind of
all right, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there.
And go beyond.
But thank you so much for your analysis on the show, Hooshang Amirahmadi from the American-Iranian Council.